Quite a few years ago, we have three daughters and a son, and our oldest daughter went missing on January 1st of, was it probably 15 years ago, 16 years ago, something like that. And we were trying to figure out where she was, and she'd been talking to this guy online, and she decided that it was a good idea to meet this guy. And she was living in Houston, met the guy, and they got in a car and went back to Minnesota, where he lived. And as they were traveling, this was on a Monday. It just so happened that New Year's was a Monday, and I found out about it by Wednesday with some help from one of our other daughters. We had figured out the emails, tracked down. I had his name, his driver's license number, his place of residence, a lot of his history. That was by Wednesday. By Friday, I knocked on the door, an hour and a half north of Minneapolis. And they were happy to be coming out. And he turns and looks at me and he says, "Can I help you?" I said, "I don't think so." And I hear her from behind him whisper, "That's my dad." And he goes, "Oh, hello, sir." I said, "Still no. You need to go. We're going to go have breakfast. Sit down and talk. We'll talk to you later." Long story short, it was a very stressful time. It was a very unnerving time. I felt very ill prepared. I felt very overwhelmed in so many ways, not knowing the process. And she had just turned 21. She's able to make her own choices. When you talk to the authorities, they tell you, well, no, she's been able to make. Anyways, there's just a lot there, and our emotions are swirling, and everything's up in the air. And so I get there, and I sit down to talk with her at lunch, and I think I surprised her because it surprised me. You ever say something you think, "Wow, did I really just say that? That doesn't sound like me in this moment." Not that I'm an overprotective dad or anything, but there were a lot of options that I had thought of on the plane.
I'm sure.
And I did kind of remind him in a very kind way. Okay, not so kind, but a clear way. I found you once, I can find you again. And so we go to sit down, and the first thing that we start to talk about is what are you thinking? You know, what's going on, and kind of what are you feeling, kind of thing. Because I don't want to come across as the overprotective, overbearing dad, but I want to make sure she's okay. And then I hear myself say, "Well, I got to tell you, I'm proud of you." I'm proud that you would stand with your heart. I questioned some of the mistakes, and I think you got some things wrong here, but I'm proud that you would stand with your heart. And I trust you. That wasn't me. Because I wanted to lay on hands without the benefit of prayer. And fix it. Why do we study what God tells us? Why do we study what's in here? Because there's going to come things this week or next year or whatever. There's going to come things that happen that you need to be prepared for. You have no idea what they are. You have no idea the way things are going to go. And in that, there's got to be a foundation. And the foundation's got to be such that it sets you up for victory. Now, I have to admit to you that that kind of surprised me that was what came out of my mind, my mouth. And admittedly, I did things, and not giving anything really away, I gave her a safe word. If I ever call and you need help, I'll ask you this, you say this, and everything's taken care of. I set up a separate bank account that had money, cash in it, for her to buy a plane ticket. Because she was insistent, she wanted to stay. I did all the things that I thought I could or should, granted. But how do I get the knowledge to deal with the wiles of the world, the struggles of life, the things, the unforeseen things, if I don't delve into and grow in God? I can't. You can't. And those things are going to come. We see here that, and we're talking about seeds and stuff, we see that there's a process, and Webster defines process as a natural phenomenon marked by gradual changes that lead to a particular result. That there's a way things happen, and because of the way things happen, it changes the result. Now, you have to believe, and at least I believe, that that's one of two results. As those in the world, there's a result that the world throws at those who are in the world. I honestly believe that there's a different result for those who are in the kingdom. And you as a child of God have a different mechanism, a different process, a different plan by God's favor. Do you realize that you get to live under God's favor? That's a whole different thing. That's a whole different way of living. A whole different place of being. See, the process of seeds really happens in two varieties, in my opinion. One is seeds are planted into the ground. It receives water. It receives sunlight. It begins to grow. Hopefully it sprouts, and then it brings fruit. And then it produces more seed, and you get to start over. The second part, though, is that same kind of process. You have a seed of thought that's an idea, and that idea becomes a belief. And then once that idea becomes a belief, there's an action that follows it, and the action brings result, and the result brings seed to lead you back to what God has got for you. Make sense? In that, the process requires this timeline, this function, and you know the timeline, right? You know the timeline of how stuff happens? Just a little bit slower than the way you wanted it. It's always just a little bit more gradual than you think it should be or could be. But there's one part of this whole process that I don't understand, and I have a hard time grasping. Do you know that the process can break at any point? Not enough sunlight, not enough moisture, too much moisture washes the seed away. The same thing can happen with our ideas and our thoughts and our beliefs. We get a little bit of an exposure to God, but then we pull back. We don't let Him develop those ideas or concepts or thoughts. We get a little bit of direction, and then the world throws or allows things to happen, and we get derailed. And suddenly we're not stable anymore. Suddenly we don't see that growth. Jesus, in His wisdom, He used this comparison and contrast kind of teaching. He called them parables, and the parables allowed Him to put something in place and allow it to be something that we could know and understand. But have you ever tried to read the parables in the Bible? Do you enjoy them? Do you like them? Are they easy for you? Sometimes not. Sometimes I'm like His disciples, and I have to go. Wait. I don't get it. How does this whole thing work? He used them, and He used them. It's kind of a way to teach. But the word parable actually has a 2-word root, and it means really not to confuse or to distract, but it really is talking about to come alongside. And he used illustrations, word pictures to come alongside of the impression he wanted to leave. Now, I have a question for you, and you can answer it if you want. This will help me out a lot, really. Why didn't he go ahead and explain them then? Did you ever notice that sometimes he did? Well, we're going to look at one now in Matthew chapter 13. We're going to look at one where he gives the parable, and there's not really an explanation. He just kind of lays it out there. Wouldn't you think there should be some instructions, some directions, and don't laugh at me, but like a checklist? I like lists. I really do. I like them a lot. I got lots of them. I have lists of lists. Anyway, shouldn't there be some kind of checklist there that kind of gives me, this means this means that? Parables aren't there for that reason. They're actually there to provide an unexpected twist that prompts thought or idea that plants seeds to grow you closer to God, or to equip you to be a better disciple, or to benefit you in some way to make you closer to Him. But let's don't forget, the disciples often approached Him and said, help us understand. Give us some kind of understanding. You know what that tells me? The disciples who spent every day with Him, multiple days with Him, several years with Him, if they needed to meditate on those things to get an insight, maybe I need to spend more time meditating on what God's Word is. Chapter 13 of the book of Matthew has what we call the parable of the sower. It's really two aspects. The first part is the backdrop, verses 1 and 2. On the same day, Jesus went out from the house and sat by the sea, and great multitudes were gathered together to him, so that he got into a boat and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. So we have this backdrop, and the first, you see it in there in verse 1, there's this time Jesus comes out, and what is he doing? He went out to sit, to reflect. Now, I don't know about you, but this will help some of us. I'll just say it that way. How about that? Maybe it'll help me. But you ever wonder why guys can sit? Don't look around. Be careful. But you ever wonder why some of us guys can sit and we really aren't thinking anything?
Even Andrew. Asked him, what are you thinking?
It's a gift. It's a gift, and we can honestly do it. We can sit there and like, no, what are you thinking? No, seriously, I was not thinking anything at all.
Your brain.
Well, it may be, yeah, but we're good. Some of us are better than others, and are able to do that. But Jesus went out and sat. Now help me with this. But if he were concerned with the process, shouldn't he be better prepared? Shouldn't he have picked a place where everybody could fit? I mean, he knew who was coming, right? You're not going to play that game, are you? I mean, somewhere in here, he had a plan, but here's the kicker, and I want you to think about it this way. God's plan that didn't look like a plan. See, sometimes we get caught up in, I've seen this happen before, or I know how this goes, or I'm expecting it this way. And the reality is we don't really know because God's plan doesn't look like a plan. He's got everything orchestrated. It wasn't by happenstance that boat was there. He knew. He understood. He had it all laid out and the backdrop was set. It wasn't a surprise that he ended up in this place. Verse 2, though, tells us also, and a great multitudes were gathered together to him, so that he got in the boat and sat, and the whole multitude stood on the shore. If you look at it from the outside, his plan wasn't crowd ready. It looks like it's overwhelming. But really what it is, he was wanting to point out the fact that, and please hear this, we can't live by crowd mentality. We have to live by a calling. And there's a big difference. Just going along, just being exciting. And Jesus dealt with this so many times where people would, by throngs, just pour out to see him or be close to him. Partly because they wanted to see the miracles. Partly because they wanted to be close and understand what was happening. Partly because they were part of the crowd that was happening. And then you had some of the others who felt called to him. They wanted to be close because they wanted to understand. They wanted to be close because they felt like there was something that God was offering them through him that was unique, that was blessed, that was powerful. We have to determine in our own steps, in our own actions, in our own willingness, what we're going to do, which part we're going to be a part of. Do we want to step further into what God has so we can be those who are part of the called and not just part of the crowd? See, I wish every week that our churches were full, that you couldn't find a seat. But you know what's more important than having a big crowd? Is having the people here who are called. We're a part of His kingdom work. Well, what's the second part? We have this backdrop. We also have this broadcasting is what I'm calling it, and it's the throwing out of the seed. Verse 3. Then He spoke many things to them in parables, saying, Behold, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. Some fell on stony places, where they did not have much earth, and they immediately sprang up because they had no depth of earth. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they withered away. And some fell among thorns, and the thorns sprang up and choked them. But others fell on good ground and yielded a crop, some 100, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Jesus describes this broadcasting or this sowing, and it's where a farmer takes a bag of seed and he just kind of throws it out there, just kind of scatters it out there. Now, I don't understand the premise of this, and I've seen some people do this. I try not to get involved in that process because we mentioned my black thumb that I don't grow things. But I never understood. For me to get this straight, there's some things that you just broadcast, right? There's some things that you have to grow a little bit before you plant them, right? And then there's some things that you have to separate because you get too many and they don't grow well, right? And somewhere in there are people, you obviously, more than me, who have knowledge of what that is. Sometimes, and the reason I bring this up, sometimes we can get caught up in the details instead of getting caught up in the delivery. Don't get caught up in the details of what sowing is. More so, think about what it is to be a part of each of those soils. How does it work for you? How would you be in a position to be better prepared? See, sometimes a farmer would go back and he'd plow over the seed and kind of cover them, kind of help a little bit. Most often they just leave them on the ground and let them germinate, let them do the things that they're supposed to do. They would call this trusting the process. Now, I don't know if you part of this or you know many people that farm. You have to be somebody that's very trusting to be a farmer, in my opinion. Huge trust. You have to trust that the weather's going to be good. You first have to trust that whoever gave you the seed gave you good seed. And then you got to trust that the weather's going to be good. And then all this when to fertilize, when not to fertilize. And you got to make sure and trust and believe that God will provide the harvest. There's just so much trust there. And then Jesus talks about this and he shows them and he even identifies each one and its ability to produce fruit. And then he ends it with this verse 8, which is confusing to me. I mean, verse 9. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, maybe I get caught up in things, and I do, admittedly, but how does that fit with sowing? I don't, he's talking about, will you do it this way? He doesn't give an explanation. He doesn't really explain. He just throws it out there. Is it any wonder that the disciples were, wait a minute, sir, what are you getting at here? See, I think when Jesus looked at the crowd, he knew that much like life, much like His Word, much like His Son, things are cast in a variety of settings. He also knew, I think, when he looked at the crowd, that everyone there wasn't a farmer. I think he looked at the crowd and he knew. So it's a trivia question for you, maybe, but if you're not a farmer, how are you supposed to catch up on and be up to date on farming terms? The process of farming. Does that confuse anybody else but me? See, Jesus knew that this crowd was big and they weren't all farmers. And
is he not talking to the ones that are called by saying?
I think you are, but we can't simply say he's just talking to the ones called, because I think he calls all of them, not just farmers. He calls them all. And I think he expects at some level for us to catch up, to search out. to listen for. And here's the kicker. And somewhere in there, we, unlike them on that day, we have the privilege of the Holy Spirit in us. You ever have the Holy Spirit prompt you to say something or do something or think on something? Man, it happens to me all the time. I'll get distracted. Sometimes people ask me, my kids were, it was always interesting to them because when we were growing up, they equated Dad's silence with Dad's mad. He must be angry. And a lot of times that's not the case. A lot of times, just between us, I only have 2 brain cells and I don't tie them both up at the same time. Things get really sideways. And I need to think, contemplate. And so I would be caught up in the process of something. And I still do this a lot. And I do it during movies. I do it during football games. I do it a lot. This is going to scare you. I do it a lot driving. You're going to see my little car now and run, aren't you? But I think we need to spend more time in the process. And even if we aren't farmers, we need to be those people that are willing to stretch ourselves and grow and understand what he's saying. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. He says there are some that the seed falls and it falls on rocky soil. Some that it falls and the soil is just not real compatible. Some that it falls on and the soil is really, 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 really good. A few years ago, I had the opportunity. I went kayaking. I don't know if you like kayaking or not. I like kayaking, and I flew to Vancouver and then got on a little small float plane and went further north. And anyways, got on a kayak, sea kayak, and I spent about 8 days bouncing around islands, camping there at night and stuff. And so at night you go out and you set up a tent. And when you set up your tent, you had to kind of watch for the roots because in that area there are huge trees, beautiful trees, but none of them have deep root systems. Everything's falling down and everything grows on top of the ground. And so you have to find a little spot where you can pitch a little bit of a tent and be out of the moist, soggy, beautiful, but moist and soggy. And I was asking a guy that I was there with, and I said, man, how does this work? And he said, because everything grows so fast and it's so humid and nothing really has a deep root system, everything is so beautiful, but it's very, very, very fragile. There's no deep root system. So you got a 60-foot tree that's got 2 feet of root that run across the ground. God's saying that there needs to be soil that's prepared for the seed that comes, that you might grow depth into your relationship. And because of that depth, you will not only be able to see the beauty of your life projected around you, but you will have the benefit of the Savior's touch in your life. You need that. It's got to be something that's clear. And he was talking about that there's a way to see that. And even in the process, there are some who will plant, and what does it say? Some will yield a crop of 100-fold or 60-fold or 30-fold. They'll get way more out of it than they ever put in. Now, I don't know how you can get better than that. I mean, I know you enjoy the stock market and watch the roller coaster ride of that, but this is telling you that it's going to be a blessed. It's going to be beneficial. It's going to be a continuous growth. I got to ask, and surely the disciples were thinking this, well, if this is all true, do you believe this is all true? If this is all true, why wouldn't you participate with him? Why wouldn't we invest at least to some level to grow with him? See, Jesus is pointing these facts out, and then he says, everyone who has ears, hear. But the fact is, everyone has ears, but not everyone can hear or is willing to hear. Which is hard because you ever feel like you come to church, you come to worship, or you read a book, and it's a new book about growing and being discipled and following God, and you read it and I read that before. I remember that. I've read stuff like that before. I get that. That's pretty good. You know why that is, right? You don't know why that is? Really? Because the things that we apply or the things that we feel like we need to apply and don't stick out to us. It catches our mind's eye. And because of that, we're always thinking about, and wondering, well, God, is this going to be blessed? Is this going to be according to your kingdom blessed? Well, here he's given us, it's not a guarantee, but it's pretty much a guarantee. If we do what he expects, he will bless. Well, I don't understand that. What's the problem? One little sentence that'll help us understand the problem. Not everybody's committed to growth. Because you know the difference between commitment and just inspiration, right? A chicken's inspired by breakfast. A pig is committed when he supplies the bacon. He's all in. Us, me, we got to get to some point. What would it take? What would it take for you to be all in? Where would that land? God's telling you it's going to be beneficial. God's telling you that there's a blessing. God's telling you that there's so much more there for you. What would be the point where you get past survival and you get to flourishing? See, I want that flourishing. But the same is true for us as it was for the disciples on that day when they heard this. We need to understand that the intention to grow takes time. It takes investment. It takes me to sacrifice for the kingdom, for the benefit. Contrary to popular belief, we don't just get better with age. I talk to people all the time, and they're like, and they'll ask me, well, when did you become a Christian? I tell them at 18, and they talk about how old I am, and we try to stay away from that. But the fact is that I've been a Christian for a very, very, very long time. And I try to emphasize that doesn't mean that I've grown any. We don't automatically grow just because we survived a year. I've met some people, astounding people, very, very, very young people in Christ and in life. And they are so mature. Oh, man, are they mature. They figured out that it takes intention. It takes steps. The second thing is that we grow according to a long-term commitment and an ongoing process, just like a seed. It doesn't automatically happen. We don't, just because we, and please don't take this the wrong way, because I am sure glad that you're here. But just coming to church doesn't mean you will automatically grow. Some of my most beneficial growth moments happened on those Monday morning scares, like I just told you about earlier. When I have to figure out what do I really believe and how do I really trust. And I try not to emphasize this too much, but when I realize as a parent, as a dad, who wants to fix everything for his kids and for his wife and for those who are dear to him, that I can't control some things. There are things too far beyond me. That doesn't excuse me from being the best dad that I can. It doesn't excuse me from being the best son that I can or the best child of God that I can. There are no excuses there, but the reality is there are so many things out of my control. I need to trust, believe, and follow the guy that's got it all in charge. That knows. And I need that growth, that long-term growth. Number 3, you can't develop trust between a parent and a child with an expensive gift. You can't buy your way through life. You can't buy your way into your child's life. God is not trying and never will try to buy your love. He wants that deep relationship. There has to be more. There has to be more than just giving financially. That works for a church. We can't just be a place that throws money at things. We've got to pour our heart into it. We've got to place ourselves in the shoes of those that are around us. We've got to, this is really strange, and I know you might want to write this down and think about it later, but we've got to be honest enough with our own hurts that we let people know that we're not perfect. We're all walking through this together. In like fashion, number 4, you can't build spiritual family by sitting in a worship center a couple of times a month. It takes more than that. It takes involvement. It has this weird thing, and I know you all do this really well, and we'll just talk about somebody that's not here that has trouble with this, but it takes this weird thing of being involved, listening when somebody else talks. Not listening to talk, but listening. Hearing what they're saying, hearing what they're needing, hearing what they're scared about, hearing what their hopes and dreams are. We need to be a place where spiritual family is clearly here. You need to know that this is a place your spiritual family exists. And we're here for you. No judgment about what's taking place. No pointing out whether your soil is fertile or not fertile. No throwing rocks at you because you got so many rocks in your yard. No, we are there for you. And spiritual family is different. It's different than biological family. Let that sink in. Think about that for a minute. It really is. Spiritual family is not based on a last name that's the same. It's based on a bloodline supplied by the King himself. And if God sees in you so much value that he'd send his son to die for you, I must treat you with respect and love and admiration. That's pretty awesome. That's how the soil grows. That's how spiritual families developed. Another thing I learned from this little parable, and it's kind of interesting to me, and I put it this way, is you can't separate good seed from bad seed by looking at it. You notice in the parable, he didn't separate it and say, I'm going to put this over here because it's good seed. I'm going to put this over here because it's not. He didn't play favorites. He just put it out there. But the reality is you can't tell good seed from bad seed just by looking at it. Sometimes you just got to throw it out there. I have a hard time with this because I'm a results-driven person. A lot of people may not do this. I set goals for my goals. I really do. I'm honest. If I want to do something, if I want to run a marathon, I set goals of how to get there. Anything that I do, I set up goals. I'm a very goal-driven person. It gives me great joy to check off that point and know that I got to that goal. I have all kinds of weird goals, things that you'd be surprised about. One of the things that I do each year, and this is really kind of strange, and I don't make a big deal of it, and you will never see the list, but I think of each of you individually. I think of my family, I think of you individually, and how could I be a better person for you? What's my goal in the relationship that I have with you? See, as a dad, I've realized a lot of things, and I made a lot of mistakes and handled things in a bad way. A lot of those things I've apologized for. A lot of those things I'm still trying to work on, but I have goals. I want to be better. This will sound strange. I've been doing this a long time, bringing messages. I want to deliver a message better. I want it to be more thought-provoking. I want it to be more intriguing. I want it to be more insightful for you, for me, for all of us. Anyways, goals are important. And don't think that just by casting the seed you're wasting your time. See, I used to think that, and I'd think, well, I've already tried with them, and I've 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 tried with them. And I don't know if I'm at 70 times 7 yet, but I'm close. It's not my job to produce the benefit in the seed. It's my job to take the seed that God supplies and cast it. Promote it. I've lost track of where I'm at. I know I'm at this I think it's 5. I bet number 6. I only have 7, so bear with me.